Some franchises seem as old as time itself. Your grandpa grew up playing Mario, and your child still plays it to this day. That's what I love about some of these video game series. I love Kirby, I love Zelda. Odds are my kids will play these games with me one day too. However, some franchises have been met with a terrible fate. Maybe the development team went under or got tasked with a different project. Sometimes the game is great, it just didn't sell well. Or maybe the trend it was capitalizing on ended before that game could become timeless. After all, part of the reason Mario is still going strong is because he could adapt from decade to decade, from genre to genre. Today, let's look at franchises that didn't fare so well, and franchises that need to make a comeback. Let's start with Rayman. This is the game that inspired the video topic after all, as Ubisoft was in the news when they discussed possibly bringing Rayman back, and Rayman definitely deserves it. He was one of the last of a dying breed, as the 5th generation of gaming, and 3D gaming especially, was stampeding down the runway. Some games decided to just be really good 2D side-scrolling platformers. Think of games like Klonoa and Kirby 64. Rayman falls into that camp. Rayman 1 has earned 2 distinct accolades over its time. For starters, it is beautiful. I mean, just look at this game. For 1995, this game is gorgeous. It looks like a souped up Super Nintendo, and I mean that in the best way possible. It went with an art style and with gameplay that was teetering on outdated. But in a way, that's what helps it stand out looking back. I mean, you gotta think, with the PS1 coming out, games were all about being gritty, realistic, embracing the 3D space, and here was Rayman being a cutesy, adorable looking platformer. But in a way, those graphics aged really well. However, it is also known for being really, really difficult and unforgiving. Rayman would get a shot at the 3D space with Rayman 2: The Great Escape. I'm currently playing through this one myself on my N64, and I'm enjoying it so far. Rayman's last 2 offerings were returned to the 2D space and are considered classics and must-plays for fans of the genre. Now, speaking of revivals, I do kind of feel like Rayman missed the boat. I wish this was a conversation Ubisoft was having 7 years ago, 6 years ago. Platformers were in the midst of an awesome revival about half a decade ago. Think of games like Shovel Knight, A Hat in Time, and Celeste. Rayman would have fit right in if they had just released a killer 2D platformer at the time. I think Rayman could still find his footing if he releases a collection as a Switch successor title. Maybe get all 5 games in one package. And if that's asking too much, maybe we can get the last 2 as a duo release. I think it'd be a great introduction for gamers to get Rayman Origins and Legends in one place before launching a new title on whatever the Switch successor ends up being. It's not like Rayman's brand is in the trash or anything. The Rabbids are still going strong. Come on, Ubisoft. Give the man what he deserves. Bring Rayman back. Speaking of remakes, let's talk about Spyro next. Spyro got an incredible trilogy remake with the Spyro Reignited trilogy a few years ago. It gave me real hope we would get a new Spyro game. Some 6 odd years later, and still nothing. It's been all crickets, to say the least. Microsoft and Activision just seem more pressed to pump out the next Call of Duty game than to get Spyro back into the gaming foray, which is just unfair. Spyro was a juggernaut on the PS1. We talked about Rayman staying firm in the 2D space and perfecting the genre. Well, Spyro went in the other direction. It decided to ram headfirst into the future. Sure, every 3D platformer of this era is judged against Super Mario 64, and I agree. It is the grandfather of the 3D space. No doubt about it at all. However, as a kid, I was always drawn to Spyro more. I thought the power-ups were better, I thought it had the better level design, and I mean, let's be real, dragons are cool, right? Dragons are awesome. I always felt like it was Spyro 1A, Mario 1B. Maybe that's controversial, maybe it's not. I don't know. Yes, Mario laid the blueprint, but I think Spyro evolved on the groundwork that Mario laid, and I think the HD remakes kind of solidify this. Now, of the 6 games, Spyro 1, 2, and 3, and Mario 64 Sunshine and Galaxy, Galaxy is probably my favorite game in either collection, but I love the graphical overhaul that the Spyro games got, and the fact they added achievements to Spyro 1, while Mario 64 was just kind of just left there, right? It just always felt to me, in one way or the other, Spyro was always one step ahead of Mario. But regardless of how great I think the trilogy for Spyro was, we haven't heard anything of new games. Still, I was hopeful for 2 reasons. The first one links back to the first point I was making. 2008, I think, is when the Spyro Reignited trilogy came out. It was in the midst of the Renaissance revival of 3D platformers, as discussed in the previous point. And B, Crash Bandicoot got a Part 4. Crash Bandicoot was the other major player. Personally, I always loved Spyro's take on a fully 3D world and environments. I always was drawn to that more than Crash Bandicoot's kind of pseudo 3D, straightforward linear approach. So when I saw Crash Bandicoot get a Part 4, I was super optimistic, super hopeful, and maybe even a tad bit jealous, hoping that Spyro would get his Part 4. And again, it's been 6 years or so, and still no Part 4. Still, my mind can't help but race and to wonder about what a Part 4 of Spyro would look like. Would it be an open world game? Would it be more segmented levels like the original Spyro? And yes, I'm calling it Spyro 4. I know we got the GameCubes and the Game Boys and the likes, but I was just thinking like a continuation of the original trilogy, picking up where Spyro Reignited left off. Either way, all this to say that I just really wanted a Spyro 4, and we never got it. And I don't know now what will happen with the whole Microsoft owning Activision, and now are they even going to make another Spyro game? I don't know. It needs to be revived. I'm kind of rambling, I guess. Just give me Spyro 4. That's all I'm asking for. Next up is Kid Icarus. I think Kid Icarus has maybe the best shot of getting a revival out of any of the games we talk about today, because it's still owned by Nintendo, right? So it has the easiest path to being made out of all the games we talk about today. But that doesn't mean it's a guarantee, right? It just means that Pit still appears in Smash Brothers, right? So it's not a completely forgotten about property. Surely Nintendo still knows that Kid Icarus exists and that people still want a new Kid Icarus game, right? But just because fans want it doesn't always mean that Nintendo wants it, right? Because even though I think it has the path of least resistance, it, like every game we talk about today, still has to answer one giant question. Does the company have any interest in bringing you back? And this is a problem that, like I said, every game we talk about today is going to run through. Like, Rayman, obviously still owned by Ubisoft, the Rabbids are still doing well, but does Ubisoft really want to push another Rayman game? I mean, it just seems like they're so busy with Assassin's Creed and the likes to really focus on a new Rayman game. But let's get back to Kid Icarus for a second, right? Kid Icarus launched as an NES game in the late 80s as a side-scroller, 5 years later, it would get a sequel on handheld that was more or less similar to the first one. And honestly, you could probably make the argument that Kid Icarus probably should have just died there. However, 2012 would be a landmark release for the franchise with the smash hit 3DS release, Kid Icarus Uprising. The Wii U and the Switch would have been great consoles to bring a sequel to Uprising to, yet, like every other game, nothing. Meaning Kid Icarus has gone 2 generations with nothing. And with all the hype for the Switch successor, people have been clamoring for a sequel to be a launch title. Or even now, as the Switch's lifespan winds down, fans are desperate for an Uprising remake. And with Xenoblade Chronicles X getting a last-minute remake, maybe it's not completely hopeless. If Kid Icarus got a sequel, I wonder which playstyle they'd go for. Would they return to their 2D roots like plenty of other franchises before them? Personally, I see that as the least likely option. Or maybe the more likely answer is to just run back the almost on-rail gameplay of Uprising. Another idea I could have sworn Nintendo would do was take advantage of Immortal Phoenix Rising. Take what worked for Phoenix Rising, throw it in the Breath of the Wild-esque engine, and give Pit a chance to really catapult the series. But it almost feels like that time has passed us now. We have to wait to see if Kid Icarus is a part of the Switch 2's line of offerings. Before we get to the last game of the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We really appreciate you guys. Now let's wrap this video up. Banjo-Kazooie is probably going to be the saddest entry here today. Rare was a force back in their Nintendo days. Banjo-Kazooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Donkey Kong 64. Their portfolio was insane. However, nothing lasts forever. And Rare's run in the gaming industry serves as a reminder of that. During the first few generations, Rare was releasing quality after quality title. But the N64 upped the ante. GoldenEye, arguably the greatest multiplayer game of all time. DK64, a behemoth of an adventure game. Jet Force Gemini, one of the most underrated gems on the console. Rare's name meant something in the 90s. There was almost a seal of approval seeing Rare's logo on a cartridge. And perhaps no better example of Rare's quality than Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo definitely improved on the blueprint Mario 64 had laid out. Better NPCs, massive worlds, crazy good power-ups, and a lovable sidekick make for a 3D collectathon you can get lost in. However, since the 90s, Rare would get bought by Microsoft, and Banjo would change for good with the 360 release Nuts and Bolts. It was a complete shift away from the platforming world that Banjo seemed to run in the late 90s and early 2000s. That was in 2018. That's 16 years ago. I don't want to believe all hope is lost. Banjo made the cut for the final DLC spots in Super Smash Bros. His games have also appeared in Rare Replay. Sure, some of the brains behind Banjo-Kazooie are no longer with Rare, but I'd still love to see the lovable duo take on one more adventure. It's worth noting Yooka-Laylee, the spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie, is getting an overhaul that promises to improve on the original release. So fans of Banjo-Kazooie's humor, levels, and charm can still pretend it's 1998 all over again. So there you have it, guys. What did you think of the games we showed today? Do you wish any of these games would get a revival? And if we do a sequel to this video, what are some other dead franchises that you want to see make a comeback? Drop them down in the comments for a chance for them to appear in the next video. Thank you guys for watching and subscribing as always. We appreciate you guys. Have a great day. We'll see you in the next episode.